Got my eyes straight ahead, got my head in the game. With the red light on, I'm just waiting for the change. Keep my head down low.
So I believe, as I've stated before, that we are about to lose the ability to speak freely within this nation of Australia. And so we don't have in our constitution, as like the Americans, the United States has, uh, a freedom of speech, but we have had an ability to speak freely, to express our opinions freely, and we've seen that curbed. We've seen the government come down and try and curtail that ability over the last few years now. We can all recall, we can all think of other issues that have come up over the last couple of years where we've put things out online, we've said things, and that we've been censored along the way, whether it be by big tech or whether it be by government pushing big tech to censor. So we've having this censorship come. So now we've got the Australian government under the leadership, I'll say in question in a little quotation marks, leadership, because Albanese is possibly the worst leader of our nation that we've had. I don't even know. He's probably just the worst. Let's not even say since this. He's just the worst prime minister we've had, the most lackluster, feckless leader we've had in the history of this great nation of Australia. So we're just going to play this video, and this is Jackie Lambie's just saying a few things about the misinformation bill that's being put up, and this is on Sky News. We'll go through what she says, and then it's a couple of other things that have happened. Also, I want to talk about what human rights have said about this misinformation bill. But at the end of it all, my opinion is still the same. The government is about to take our ability to speak freely away from us. That's the ultimate goal for the government. So anyway, let's check out this video. This is Jackie Lambie talking on Sky News.
Well, public submissions closed today on the government's misinformation bill. Let's go to Jackie Lambie, the independent senator. As things stand, Jackie, I'm not sure how much detail you've gone through on this for now, but as public submissions closed today, are you going to vote for it? Do you like it?
Look, to be honest with you, I've been extremely busy with other things, but I have to laugh. When you're looking at ACMA, who's going to police it all, what a joke that is. That's their first problem. They're not serious about this misinformation stuff anyway. So seriously, it's going to be really, really difficult. It's not near tough enough. You've got, you've got those social media sites saying that we'll come in now and we'll do our little bit. Well, that's just rubbish as well. Until you put your foot down on them, nothing is ever going to change. So the misinformation, there is, unfortunately, when people do this.
So before we get any further, so I'll just highlight, okay, again, this is going to be the government policing the government, which never works out. Never works out. It's such a corrupt way of doing things. The government trying to hold itself accountable. That just never works. And then, like Jackie's saying here, that these big tech companies are kind of come in and say, well, we'll do our little bit. The problem is, it's not really the big tech companies that the government is going to go after. In the long run, they're going to go after you and I. This is what they want. They want to curtail our ability to speak freely, to express our opinions. That's the real goal here. This isn't about freedom. This isn't about misinformation. This is about controlling the narrative and forcing the government's narrative and not allowing independent voices to be heard. That's what this is really about. Anyway, continue.
No one's ever held accountable, and that's the problem. All they're doing is tinkering around the edges, mate, and it's not going to make any difference. It's certainly not going to be helping our kids, and it's certainly not going to be stopping any misinformation that's going out there. And certainly when you've got ACMA who's policing itself, seriously, mate, haven't we seen this from Defence? We've seen the military justice system. It's been policing itself for 20 years. How's that going for it? Yeah, not good.
Well, I mean, I made that point earlier. I mean, the government or a government agency is the one who's deciding what's true here, what's truth. And the government doesn't have a really good record when it comes to truth.
No, and when they're policing themselves, good luck with that. So really, it's just been a waste of time. They're not taking it seriously. It's become a joke. So
is there any point? I mean, yeah, look, despite best intentions, is just leave it. Let the citizenry decide what's true and what's not.
Know, unless you're going to put your foot in hard. But going half pregnant, mate's never going to fix anything. That's the problem with the leaders in this country, is they do things half pregnant, and that's why we never succeed. That's where the country is heading. That's where we are in the 21st century. Yeah.
Okay. So just, I mean, slightly related to that, it's about what's true and what not online. When you come to, and it sort of brings into this question freedom of speech and what's allowed. When it comes to protests that have taken place on the weekend, and you've seen some pro-Lebanese protests that have taken place, which is fine, but then you've got others who have gone beyond that and held up the pictures and the signs of Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, the terrorist group.
So if you don't know what he's talking about here, so they had these protests in Melbourne and Sydney. So yeah, they've held up these pictures of the former Hezbollah leader, and he was a terrorist, a designated terrorist. He was a disgusting individual. Okay, and now he's been assassinated, believed by the Israelis. But come on, the Australian government was part of declaring that Hezbollah is a terrorist organization, and yet at the same time, they allow pro-Palestinian and pro-Hezbollah protests to go on in our street. This is the kind of rhetoric, the kind of rubbish that is allowed to go on and what they say, well, this is this is a freedom of speech. These people are allowed to, and yet people who were born here, people who would stand up and point out the government's own inefficiencies, shortfalls, they will be arrested. You and I. This is where we're heading. The government wants to control the narrative, and then when people point out that, hey, these things are wrong, then we're told, no, you're wrong. You're the one who is wrong. These people are allowed to protest. They're allowed to come here, disrupt our country, because we've given them the ability. And you are wrong. You are racist for thinking otherwise. It's ludicrous.
I mean, what do you think should happen to them?
Well, obviously nothing's going to happen to them, and that's why this will continue in the country, because quite frankly, you have your minister out there and you have a PM out there that is too scared to say you're getting on a plane this morning and you are never coming back here if you're a dual citizen. I mean, where do they think this is going to lead? Do they think by not dealing with this today or in the next week that this is going to be good for the country? Because I can assure you it is not. Turning a blind eye to this stuff and not holding people responsible and making sure actions are taken against them, this will continue. They want a peaceful country. I suggest they start being grown-ups. They start showing that they're a leader, and they start showing goddamn courage in this country and saying, you don't belong here, you're getting out, and get them out of here.
So this is what I've said numerous times. They want to be leaders, but we don't have actual or any worthwhile leadership in the nation at the moment. So with this misinformation bill, like I said, it's really going to come down. It's really coming down to pushing back against the regular citizens. This isn't trying to police the big tech companies, and this isn't wanting to shut down the protesters that come from other nations and protests in favor of Islamic terrorists. No. We can't say anything about them. This will come down and harm regular Australian citizens. You and I, who were born here, generational people have been here for generations and generations. That's who they're going to end up attacking. Now, I just want to read from this article that came about, and it's talking about it's raising some issues that even the Human Rights Commission, they've made a submission and said this is some of the concerns they've had with the misinformation bill. So they said they've got a couple of key points. They said the first issue is the overly broad and vague way that key terms such as misinformation, disinformation, and harm are defined. Broad and vague. When you're writing a bill, when you're trying to put forward something for legislation, you shouldn't be vague. If you want to be vague, sorry, not if you want to be vague. If you put forward a bill and you are vague, you've got to wonder what your true intentions are. What are your true intentions? And this is why I think they are being misleading, really just disingenuous when they're telling us this is about protecting the children. Remember, this is the narrative they've gone with. We're trying to protect our children online. This is what we're trying to do, and we're trying to stop, the keep putting forward these Nazi movements, racist commentary that comes up. But this is the narrative that they've moved with. But instead of being very specific when it comes to the legislation, when it comes to writing the legislation, they go through for this very broad and vague key terms. The second one is, it continues on, sorry, saying drawing a clear line between truth and falsehood is not always simple, and there may be legitimate differences in opinion as to how content should be characterized. The broad definitions used here risk enabling unpopular or controversial opinions or beliefs to be subjectively labeled as misinformation or disinformation and censored as a result. But this is the problem, which is what they said on Sky News. The issue is it's the government that's deciding what the misinformation is. Then the government can't be trusted to declare the truth. Can't be trusted to tell us what the truth is. The government can't. They can't tell us this is misinformation, this is disinformation, because they constantly push a narrative that is a lie constantly. The second key problem, it says, is the low harm threshold established by the proposed law. Content that is reasonably likely to cause or contribute to serious harm risks being labeled as misinformation or disinformation. The categories of harm are themselves extremely broad, including things like harm to the health of Australians and harm to the Australian environment. How broad and vague is that? Going on, says reasonable people may have very different views about what constitutes harm under these categories. The definitions also provide no guidance about how harm is meant to be judged. It is true that what is required under the bill is not just harm, but serious harm. The effect of this, however, is uncertain given the proposed law does not go on to define serious harm. It further requires only that the content has to be reasonably likely to cause or contribute to serious harm. And in other words, the government will be able to just make it up as they go along. That is what will happen. They'll charge someone and just make it up as they go along. Mark my words. Content can be labeled as misinformation even if it does not actually cause harm. It only has to be reasonably likely to do so. The third concern highlighted by the Commission is the way the proposed law defines excluded content, which is content that is protected from being labeled as misinformation or disinformation. Crikey. The one example here is that the draft bill defines any content that is authorized by the government as being excluded content. Or golly gee, any information that the government puts out cannot be labeled as misinformation or disinformation. We have seen plenty of times where the government has gotten it wrong, or the government has purposely put out information because that suits their narrative. But under this misinformation bill, it can't be labeled. It can't be defined as excluded content. The government will be allowed to. It cannot, by definition, be misinformation or disinformation under the law. It's rigging the game for itself. This fails to acknowledge the reality that misinformation and disinformation can come from government. Indeed, government misinformation and disinformation raises particular concerns given the enhanced legitimacy and authority that many people attach to information received from official government sources. Do you remember just a couple of days ago where the ABC, the government owned media company, corporation, put out that report about our soldiers, and they added in a few little, in the footage, in the audio, they added in a few little a few little what do you call it? A few little gunshots. They added a few gunshots in the audio to make it sound like our soldiers were shooting at people, were shooting a lot more than they were. Misinformation, disinformation, that's a government corporation. It can't be labeled as misinformation or disinformation, even though it's been proven to be wrong. Isn't that what this bill is saying? Keep going. This specific exclusion privileges government content but fails to accord the same status to content authorized by the opposition, minor parties, or independents. Wow, that is criminal. Criminal. The result is that government content, sorry, the result is that government content can never be misinformation, but content critical of the government produced by political opponents might be. Does anyone think maybe we're not living in a free democratic society anymore? Any law censoring online information to counter misinformation and disinformation must be scrupulously impartial and apolitical. The fourth concern relates to the powers to regulate digital content that are granted under the draft bill. To digital platform providers and indirectly the ACMA. There are inherent dangers in allowing any one body, whether it be a government department or social media platform, to determine what is and is not censored content. This is exactly what we have seen over the last, 4 or 5 years now, when it came to COVID-19, the Wuhan virus. This is exactly what we've seen. When any other opinion, if it was not popular opinion or if it wasn't the government sanctioned opinion about COVID, about lockdowns, it was immediately censored. And like it says here, that you've got this risk that efforts to combat misinformation and disinformation could be used to legitimize attempts to restrict public debate. That's exactly what they did. They used censorship. Okay, they used misinformation and disinformation to restrict public debate about COVID-19. And we were all told that, well, the vaccine's completely safe. And as a matter of fact, you were a very bad person and you were endangering lives if you didn't agree, if you didn't go along with it, if you didn't get the vaccine. You were a danger to society. But this is the problem. This, with the government that we currently have, with the feckless leadership that we currently have, this is the problem when you have vague statements, vague wording, broad, vague wording within legislation that they're just trying to push through. And this is it's not about protecting children from online harm. This is about attacking freedom, attacking our ability to speak freely. This is a direct attack on the Australian public. Now, I'm just going to go to this one article, and I've got to be honest. I'd thought for a while I didn't really want to talk about this article. It mainly because of the story behind it. But this had come up about 2 weeks ago. So a couple of men, they've been charged with doing the Nazi salute, okay, in Sydney. Now this had happened outside the Sydney Jewish Museum. And now they've claimed that they were mimicking Ricky Gervais' skit. That's what they've told the courts. Now, unfortunately, when I'm listening, going through the storyline and the narrative that they're saying in court, I could see a couple of blokes, walking past the court and just doing the little salute very quickly and mucking around saying, oh, Ricky Gervais did this little bit about the Nazis and all that and did the salute. And you're reading it, you think, yeah, I could see guys doing that. I could see people I know joking, of course, mucking around, but doing this very skit. Now, they were seen by a guard who called the police, and somehow the police got there in time I mean, of all the crimes to get, the police got there in time to arrest these people and charge them. Now, the main issue is, okay, I'm going to read part of the story. It says, the men have pleaded not guilty to one count of knowingly displaying by public act a Nazi symbol without excuse, plus a backup charge. It's always good to have a backup charge of behaving in an offensive manner in or near a public place or school. A 2020 amendment to New South Wales law made it illegal to display a Nazi symbol with a maximum penalty of 12 months imprisonment or $11,000 fine, or both. The current case is one of the first to reach a contested hearing in New South Wales. Magistrate Jennifer Atkinson was told that during his police interview, Mr. Mitchell made repeated references to a skit by Ricky Gervais, which he had seen on Netflix. I haven't seen it, but whatever. So he's seen it on Netflix. In a short clip of that performance played to court, the comedian refers to the Holocaust not being a traditional subject for comedy and how the name Adolf is no longer used by parents. He then fixes his hair and tells the audience that he does the movement quickly so nobody can take a photograph of him doing that, while quickly raising his arm in the air. So I can imagine Ricky Gervais. I haven't seen it, but I could imagine him doing this. It'd probably be pretty funny. So Mr. Mitchell's counsel, Adrian Cancery, said his client's gesture was fleeting and minimized Ricky Gervais to a T. But another issue that the defense have raised, they've said that this has highlighted the wording of the New South Wales legislation, which contains no definition of what a symbol is. No definition of what a symbol is. So you're walking past the Jewish Museum. I don't think if you're walking past the Jewish Museum, I don't think it's a great idea. It's not a smart idea, okay? Even if you're drunk, even if you're joking around, it's not a smart idea to do anything Nazi related. The big issue I see with legislation like this Nazi symbol legislation in New South Wales and like the Misinformation Bill, okay, is that the government is putting this legislation, whether it be state or federal governments, they're putting this legislation through. The wording is far too broad, far too vague. The government can put out misinformation and disinformation, but you can never actually say what content that they put out can never be misinformation. However, misinformation or information that I put out or that you put out can be labeled as misinformation or disinformation. Therefore, we can be charged, we could be held accountable for information that they deem misinformation, the government deem disinformation, but they can never be held accountable. This gives the government, in my opinion, the ability to arrest and to hold people in jail, in custody, while they make up the charges that they want to charge you for. This is the problem when you have vague wording, like what's happened with the this Nazi symbols, or the Misinformation Bill. The government is making up the charges as they go along. They're giving themselves the ability to arrest people and then make up the charges as they go along, but they can never be held accountable for misinformation or disinformation. These are very, very dangerous times, and this is very dangerous legislation that they're trying to push through. As I've said before, when it comes to, you look at what the ASIO bosses said. Hey, if you've got nothing to hide, if you've got privacy, because we're not looking at you, we've got the ability, so you've got nothing to worry about because you've got privacy because we're just not looking at you at the moment. So what are you worried about? It's like the old, if you've got nothing to hide, you've got nothing to worry about. Just allow us to come in and look all through your house anyway. We are on the cusp of losing all of our freedoms, and no one is really pushing back against it. Not enough people standing up against this rubbish. That's my opinion. You let me know what you think. I think we are heading towards very, very dangerous times. I'm Jay Fallon. Thanks for listening to The Slippery Slope.
They just fuel the desire that will take me high.